here's your host, Jason Voorhees and Aaron Savage.
Oh, yeah!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports and Metal Podcast. We are your hosts, as always. This is Aaron Savage. With me, as always, my partner in crime. There he is, Mr. Jason Voorhees. What's going on, Jay? How are you?
Nothing, man. I'm pumped.
Yeah, we have a big guest tonight, but before we get into that, I have to give a shout out to our number one sponsor, La Terrain Watches. Make sure you go to their website, www.laterrain.com. That's LA-TOURAINE.com. Use our promo code SNM. That's the letters SNM, as in Sports and Metal, and you're going to save 10% off your purchase. Tell them Sports and Metal sent you. So, without further ado, let me introduce our very special guest tonight. He's a veteran author, music journalist. He's the editor and host of the iHeartRadio program podcast, Backstaged, The Devil in Metal, which I listened to season 1. I'm waiting for season 2. It's awesome. He's also an author. He's written Louder Than Hell, The Definitive Oral History of Heavy Metal. He's written I'm the Man, the story of that guy from Anthrax, the Scott Ian autobiography. He's written Al Jorgensen's autobiography. He's written Raising Hell, Backstage Tales from the Lives of Metal Legends. He's worked for Rolling Stone. He's written for Rolling Stone, MTV, VH1, Guitar Magazine, Guitar.com, Musician.com, MusicPlayer.com. He has a Bachelor of Science in Journalism from Boston University. Without further ado, please welcome to the show, Mr. Jon Wiederhorn.
Hey.
What's up, John?
How you guys doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good.
Good,
It's
man. What have you been up
Friday.
to, man? You're a friend of the show. We've had you on before. We always are very happy to have you on, and we're always glad that you're willing to accept our invitation. But tell us what you've been up to, man.
It's been a crazy year. I've been working pretty intently on a couple books, and then still freelancing for a bunch of different magazines. Well, mostly Guitar World. That's kind of my main go-to these days, where they come to me. But it's been some pretty cool interviewing a lot of happening bands. But things are just sort of even now resurfacing from the specter of music and journalism and COVID, and it was. I'm so glad to be able to go to shows, man. I mean, for the longest time, I know people have been just going without masks for over a year now, but it took me until after I got COVID to say, fuck it.
Yeah.
But
it's definitely great to be back with live music. And you were just telling us before we went live, just last night, you were at the show in Montclair, New Jersey, here in our home state, the Armored Saint and Wasp show.
Yep.
And I was talking about it with you before we came live. Obviously, John Bush couldn't perform. Unfortunately, he's got an illness. Hopefully, It's not COVID. But Jason McMaster from Dangerous Toys filled in. And how was that? How was he?
He was great. I was kind of bumming because, Armored Saint is, it isn't just John Bush, but he's the voice of a Saint as well as Anthrax for a little while. But I always loved his Saint stuff. So, but McMaster totally pulled it off. He was all pro. He was rocking. He was having a good time, and the band were fantastic. They looked like they were having a great time too. And it really brought me back to the first club metal show I ever went to was Armored Saint opening, and then Wasp and Metallica. And that was in Baltimore, back in '84, I guess. So it was a trip to be able to see Armored Saint with Wasp again.
Yeah, full circle. That's cool. And how was Wasp? I have to ask.
They were actually really good. I was a Chris Combs guy, so I was like, I don't really know if Blackie and this bunch of other guys are gonna pull it off, but they did. It was all pro. They did a set of oldies, pretty much, sticking mostly the first 3 albums, and great live presentation, great charisma, and it was a lot of fun. A lot of upper middle-aged guys there.
I have to ask, obviously, when you think of Wasp, you think of the raw meat getting thrown. And obviously, we know that's not happening.
No meat. No.
But what did we get stage-wise from Wasp in the current incarnation?
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't even. Well, there's Blackie in his kind of trademark attire, but he didn't drink blood from a skull. Unfortunately, I was looking forward to that again. I guess he figured other people stole his thunder on that one, like who's drank, but I think King Diamond drank blood, of course.
Yeah.
Mayhem drink blood from a skull, so
Yeah.
it's old hat now. but he was good. You know, he was great. He was grateful to the crowd. They closed with a medley of Animal Fuck Like a Beast and Can You See the Real Me from The Who. And it was pretty killer. They had big television screens that were broadcasting their videos so you could see the old Wasp while you're watching the new Wasp. And some of those videos, man, you know, you sometimes forget what those 80s videos looked like with the not just scantily clad chicks, which is, of course, a trademark, but stuff you definitely couldn't pull off today. And it was tongue in cheek, but like if for Love Machine, you got this gorgeous blonde in a tank that's gradually filling with water, and it looked like something out of a Saw movie. Water never went above her head, so maybe it's like more of a dream sequence than a torture scene.
Yeah.
But between that and the exercise devices with chains attached to them and these gorgeous girls connected to them, you know, it was pretty suggestive stuff. But that's what the 80s were all about.
Of course. Jason and I were supposed to be at that show last night, and honestly, we both kind of forgot about it. And Jay's actually going this coming week in Pennsylvania out by Valley Forge, so unfortunately, I can't make it, but I'm disappointed we would have bumped into you last night.
No, yeah. I've missed so many shows just by not realizing it. Like, I'm still kicking myself for missing Merciful Fate in Brooklyn. I just spaced on the date, you know?
Yeah.
I was like,
it happens.
oh, yeah, Fate's back. I'm like, oh,
that's what happens when you get older. We start spacing on all the dates. Aaron and I were supposed to go to another show. We were supposed to go see, I forget what band it was, in Vineland, and we missed that show too. So yeah, it happens a lot. But
speaking of Vineland, ironically, I know Accept had to cancel a show there last month. I think it was at the Landis Theater in Vineland, and I know Jason McMaster filled in when they played their Penns Peak, Pennsylvania show. He filled in for Accept when Mark Tornillo was sick. So he's making the rounds.
Yeah.
He's like everybody's bullpen guy now.
I was never a big Dangerous Toys fan, but to hell, if he can pull it, you know, he could do the fill-in for, you know, kind of like the bench, pinch hitter. He's pinch hitting.
Yeah, exactly. Little sports references here. It is sports and metal. But yeah,
I saw Overkill not so long ago, and Phil from Machine Head, well, formerly, was playing guitar for them, which was pretty cool. And apparently he's done that a lot with Overkill too. So it's a little bit of the juggling, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Jason and I have a few things we want to get your thoughts on. Before we do, though, tell us about the two books you're working on. Tell us about this.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. One is with Marty Friedman, who played with, of course, Megadeth. I like to see that Megadeth sweater you're wearing, or hoodie.
Jay's favorite band.
Yeah. And with good reason. But I don't know. I thought he was on their two best albums. Super arguable because they put out a bunch. But he was with them for 10 years, and he talks candidly about those years, as well as all the time he spent before that. He was in Cacophony with Jason Becker, you know, legendary guitarist who very sadly contracted ALS while he was in the David Lee Roth band. And they became super close when, you know, Marty and Jason did when they were in Cacophony together. So he tells sort of the inside story of his relationship and Jason's struggle. And he talks about his early bands, Deuce and Hawaii. And then an awful lot of the book is about when he said, I just don't want to be in a breakthrough metal band anymore. I've got this. I've always loved Japan. I've loved J-pop music. I want to live in Japan. Everybody thought I was absolutely out of his mind for, you know, quitting Megadeth right at a time where they were still filling venues. Metal was in a weird place, but he didn't want to play metal anymore. He wanted to play J-pop. So he went to Japan, and before long, he was playing with some of the best J-pop players. And then he made inroads and ended up doing TV shows. He's been on hundreds television shows. Right now, he's actually hosting one for Hulu in Japan. But one of his coolest was, I think, something Rock Fujiyama, where he was pretty much the MC, and he had different guests on, and they did these sketches, and he'd run back and forth with his guitar and be wailing on all this crazy shit, and they mixed popular Japanese songs with classic metal tunes. And so they'd play these like weird variations of the two. I mean, Japanese media is kind of surreal and out there. So
Sure.
it was pretty insane stuff. And for him to be this American, who learned to speak Japanese fluently, and went over there and lived out his dream. I mean, he's lived out like 3 dreams now. And he's still doing it. He's there. He's been appointed an ambassador of Japanese culture to spread through the world, and so he keeps, he plays with the Tokyo Philharmonic all the time, and he tours with J-pop bands, and then he tours his solo stuff. So he still gets to play metal, and he says every few years he gets a call from Mustaine, and he has to regretfully turn it down, but he's glad that they have a great lineup now and a really good guitarist.
Would Mustaine ever admit to that? I don't know.
I don't know. I did recently talk to Mustaine, and he talked about the moment that Marty was definitively out of the band. Not definitively out. The moment he felt Marty was going to definitely leave, and it was when they were doing the song "Breadline" for Risk. And Marty was really excited about the solo he'd played for the song. The label wanted to make this a big single for the album, and Marty had done something very kind of neoclassical, I guess lots of notes and complexities. And management got back to Dave and said, "Yo, man, we love the song, but this solo, you got to replace the solo." Dave said, "Really? You want to replace Marty's solo?" And they said, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, okay, we've got a couple choices. Either we can cut it out and just put a soundbite over it or music over it. I can play it, but you better tell Marty that I'm playing the solo he was supposed to play, or we can get him back in to redo it." And they said, no, you just do it. We got to get this done right away. So Dave did the solo. He didn't tell Marty because, he had no idea that management hadn't. And so then he goes, the album release comes out. They're having listening to the playback. Marty hears Breadline, and as the solo comes up, Dave said he's looking at him. Dave's solo, which replaced his, plays, and Marty's jaw just drops. And he said he was crestfallen. And he said he could tell he was just really hurt and pissed.
Yeah, I never heard that story. Amazing story. Wow.
Yeah. Mustaine told me that actually for an interview I just recently did with him for Guitar World. And Marty basically confirmed it, but he kind of had a foot out the door before then, and then he agreed to keep touring with them. Finish up the album for the Countdown. No, it was for the Risk, of course, tour. But and he did, but he suffered severe panic attacks because he, mentally wasn't there, and he didn't feel connection with the band or his bandmates anymore. And he actually had to be pretty much babysat by his wife during the day and spoon-fed and really coddled, because emotionally he just really couldn't handle it. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. He said he was a wreck. And then he'd make it to the show, and when he was on stage, he could do it. But as soon as he stepped off stage again, he's like, "Get me to the hotel. I can't even be around." And it wasn't so much that he hated the band or the bandmates. They were still, he still considers them his good friends. But I guess he'd made this decision, and just the emotional intensity of it was too much to bear at the time.
Wow, what an amazing story.
I know. That's crazy.
Yeah, I never heard that. Wow.
Yeah, he was very forthcoming about a lot of stuff, and I think it's going to be a really interesting read for people.
Yeah. When should we expect to see that interview?
Well, the book should come out next year, probably towards the end of the year.
Okay. No, what I meant to say was the Dave Mustaine guitar.
Oh, that's out.
Did that come out yet?
Yeah, it was actually, I think, last month's cover story on.
I missed it. Okay.
But you know what? It is online.
I'm going to have to check that out. Okay.
Guitarworld.com. They definitely
Cool.
have.
And when should we expect the book?
That'll be probably towards the end of next year.
Okay. Cool. And what other book you working on?
It around. Well, I'm working with a guy named Derek Schulman, who's quite a legend in the music industry. For prog rock fans out there, he was the frontman of the band Gentle Giant, British influential band that came up with King Crimson and Genesis and Pink Floyd, but they were very popular in their time and toured all of Europe and America and sold lots of records, but they never reached that plateau that like Yes did and Genesis did. So they're around for 10 years, from 1970 to 1980. Before that, he was actually in a really successful pop group called Simon Dupree and the Big Sound. He was Simon Dupree, and his brother played in the band with him, Ray Schulman. And they were on Top of the Pops, and they were around when a lot of English bands were just up and coming, and they auditioned at Abbey Road in front of George Martin and Jeffrey Emmerich, and they played the circuit with everyone from Uriah Heep to Black Sabbath, and so it's an interesting story in that it captures his early years coming up with this band, Simon Dupree, and they were very poppy and a little psychedelic, and then they decided, we're tired of playing straight music, we want to do stuff that's much more complicated and off the wall. So he formed Gentle Giant, and the whole career arc of Gentle Giant is followed in the book. And then when they broke up in '80, since he was basically acting as the band's manager or making the business decisions in their later years, he entered the music business and worked at Polygram, starting in the A&R department. First band he signs is Bon Jovi. He discovered them and kind of nurtured them at a time where they didn't, they were just starting out. They had one single that was getting played on local radio, and it was the John Bon Jovi band. No, I can't.
Runaway. The single would have been Runaway.
Yeah, but they weren't Bon Jovi.
They weren't Bon Jovi yet. It was John. I know John had been
John Bon Jovi, all one word.
Station in Manhattan.
HN. Yeah. So, and then Derek went on to become the CEO of Atco. The CEO of Polygram, moved over to Atco, signed Pantera, signed Cinderella, signed Kingdom Come, signed Slipknot after he went over to Roadrunner. And it really follows these two stories of his, this being a frontman of a touring rock band, and then the other side of the business, learning what it's like to run a record company and deal with artists on that level. And he said he was really glad that he had been a touring musician, because he definitely was taken more seriously by a lot of these guys. Like AC/DC didn't want to deal with record company types, but they were pretty, they were close to him and they knew him. And then when he came in and helped resurrect their career during that kind of second wave, I think that was when Thunderstruck came out, probably around then. But they were open to him being in the studio and like watching what they were doing and offering tips, because he was an industry veteran. He was a musician. He was kind of one of them. And he said that served him well, really, with all the artists that he dealt with. He says there's evil sides of the music industry for sure. And there's lots of stories of, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and hookers and blow. But he wasn't, he was a straight shooter. His dad actually tragically died of a heart attack when he was 50. His dad was 50 and he was 15. Indelibly stamped him for life. And I'm kind of jumping around here, but it's sort of germane, because he decided, well, first he thought he'd never live past 50. He's in his 70s now, but he decided to live a straight and clean lifestyle. And aside from when someone dosed him on acid, one of the friends of someone in Status Quo and he held onto a pole in the street for dear life for hours while oceans of blood washed up around him during his bad trip. Aside from that, he's never had any weed, or he's never done any coke, and he'd go drinking with Pantera, and then he'd go to the bar and have a club soda, so it looked like he was having like a vodka or something.
Yeah.
Or if they were doing shots, he'd like pour his into the potted plant. So it was a trip, but they loved him. He was really super important to them getting signed, and their early years for sure.
I'm really looking.
This
forward
sounds like
to
a
that.
freaking awesome, like both of these books. Like I'm psyched because both stories are amazing. Like I think it's amazing that it's detailing somebody that was actually a musician that's now on the other side of the business, because you would think that would happen more often. No, beings that like they have that the closeness together, they understand each other, and having played in a band, they respect him more. And
a lot of musicians go on to management, and some go on to become producers. But you're right, on the record label front, you don't see too many record label executives, outside of like Motown or the people who are a lot of the hip hop artists go on to form their own labels and stuff. But yeah, to grow organically from one label to another, through starting with the promotions department, going up through A&R, and then becoming a CEO. It's a pretty incredible thing. I've always wanted to do books on people who not only were famous and had crazy stories to tell, but had a really interesting story, a really interesting life, and a really interesting arc, where like with someone, Scotty Ian, for instance, he started off as this just high school kid who discovered he loved metal, and then said, well, I love Iron Maiden, why can't I do this? I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna make a band. And he followed his dream, and became a spokesperson of metal to this day, and was one of the greatest thrash bands, of course. And then with Al Jurgensen, I just wanted to, I knew I couldn't go wrong with that. I wanted to tell the most outrageous memoir type story that you ever could read, because I knew he was, he lived this insane life. He overdosed like dozens of times.
Yeah.
He was doing heroin all day long for 15 years, and somehow came out the other side now. And I believe he's sober, even though he's struggled with that in the past. But I saw him not so long ago, and he looked really good. But he had a crazy story, and all these guys were instrumental in these scenes. Like, with Scotty, he could tell the whole story of thrash, really, and Al could tell the whole story of the birth of industrial music up to the present. And even Roger Moret from Agnostic Front, who I worked on with a book, he was there from the ground up, with living in the streets with the guys in Agnostic Front and Cro-Mags and Murphy's Law, other bands, squatting together, and then building this scene for themselves on the New York Lower East Side. So yeah, I guess I love stories, not just.
And you're right. I mean, Scott, I'm the Man, the Scott Ian book you did with him, one of my favorite books I've ever read.
Oh, thanks.
And you nail it. It's true. I mean, you think of Al Jorgensen, you think of Scott Ian. He was there for the birth of thrash, as far as being a part of it and even being on the periphery of it. He would go into Johnny Z's record store all the time, and Johnny had zero interest in Anthrax until finally he did. They pestered him to death. I think
they pestered him. Absolutely.
I think signed him when they sabotaged him in the IHOP on.
He was running errands for Johnny, basically, and taking the guys in Metallica to their decrepit warehouse where they lived and rehearsed.
Yeah, let them crash there. But I will tell you, one of the things I loved about reading Scotty's book is I grew up around the area where Johnny Z had the record store, and I used to go to that IHOP. That's where that was always where I had my chocolate chip face pancake when I was a kid. I could just picture Johnny Z sitting there and Scott coming in and sat and bugging him at breakfast. But Al Jorgensen's another one. I mean, he's from the beginnings. Like, I mean, you listen to the first Ministry album. What's the name of it? Sympathy. I can't remember the first record.
Sympathy, yeah.
With Sympathy. There you go. Thank you, John. It's pure 80s
Duran
Euro
Duran.
pop. Yeah, it's Duran Duran. Like, how did Al Jorgensen's journey take him from that to what we get now?
What he says,
it boggles
is
the
that he
mind.
never wanted to be a hairsprayed pop star.
Sure.
But the label made him do it.
But
Don't
even
know
had
if
the
that's
faux British
exactly
accent.
true. I think he
did-
wanted to succeed, you know.
Yeah.
And I think he was like, I'll play whatever's going to work. But he had this love for this aggressive,
Sure.
you know, ferocious music. And then he gradually turned Ministry into really like an industrial thrash band. And
Oh, absolutely. But the point being is, like, it's the same thing with Scott and Al, how they were there from the birth of their genres. And they can tell the whole story as good as anybody.
Right.
You know? And you know what? People talk about Nine Inch Nails. By the way, to me, Pretty Hate Machine is my favorite. Excuse me, Nine Inch Nails album. But when you talk about albums to me that were the game changers that really got us to where we ended up in the 90s when industrial really blew up, Ministry's Twitch album. I mean, to me that was like what Nine Inch Nails was before Nine Inch Nails was Nine Inch Nails.
Okay, but what got Ministry, where I was sold on them was The Mind Is a Terrible Thing to Taste, because Twitch really had the sampled guitars. Nothing on there was actually played. I mean, it was played into the samples, but you're right. That's where they really got heavy. And
that was, to me, that was where the sound was born.
Yeah, and Stigmata was the birth of, you know, industrial metal.
Sure.
But it's funny you mentioned Nine Inch Nails. You look back at your career, and I've been doing this for a stupid long time. So I interviewed for Hit Parader magazine. I interviewed Trent Reznor right before the Downward Spiral came out. Now, I'd been a fan of Pretty Hate Machine, which is a pretty straightforward, you know, dancey electronic album with some really heavy vocals.
It's an aggressive dance album. Yeah.
But it's not something that kind of comes at you from 16 different directions. And Downward Spiral is more of a roller coaster. It's this epic kind of cinematic record. So I asked Trent Reznor during the course of the interview, I said, well, this is a really interesting album, and it's very, very diverse. It's quite a change of pace from Pretty Hate Machine and A Broken. Do you think that maybe on a commercial level, you may have shot yourself in the foot? And of course, that was the album that broke them with the mainstream, you know, in a huge way. You know,
a concert that I'll always harken back to in my memories fondly, just because you talked about Wasp with the video with the girl and the, you know, whatever. When I saw Nine Inch Nails in '94 with the Jim Rose Circus and Marilyn Manson, when they had just come out with Portrait of American Family,
right?
What a fucking show! What a show it was. I mean, it was, if there was ever a show to scare your parents and like make you think the world was coming to an end, it was that show. I don't know what about it. I mean,
it was the chaos. That's what's missing today, and a lot of it's because there's so many lawsuits, and because people are afraid of you know, doing something that's going to get them in tons of trouble. But that show, you had Manson, you had Reznor, everyone was crazed, and you didn't know what was going to happen any given night. You know, Manson very well might whip his
thing
mic
out.
stand into his drummer's head, which he did on numerous occasions,
or whip his thing out. He was, from what I recall,
or he would pull his thing out,
on
and
stage
someone
at the
would
Garden.
either pretend to blow him or would actually do so, depending on what you read or believe. So it was, you know, it was a risky, dangerous time. Manson used to cut himself with a broken light bulb. I saw him do that on, I think it was a Lollapalooza. Did they play a Lollapalooza tour? Maybe it was an Ozfest. I think it was
an Ozfest. It was an Ozfest.
But it was pretty nuts.
Ever
Kind of like Iggy Pop, you know?
Have you ever interviewed Manson?
Yeah, a couple times, a few times.
How
really
how was that? I know he is. I've read his book, and his book
unfortunately, his current career is maybe in a state of flux. Who knows? But if you know, if I guess you know, on the politically correct bandwagon, it's so hard to, you know, see things happen to people like Louis C.K. and then root for him. but he certainly came back. You know,
it'd be tough for Manson to come back.
But Manson, I think, had a different level of, I guess, debauchery and pushing the line just too far. But God, he's a smart guy. He's a funny
really
guy.
Is. I mean, I thought
he lived
he
it.
was brilliant back then. I mean, it was something to behold. It was definitely like for me personally, my favorite Manson era. My favorite album from Manson is probably Mechanical Animals.
I love that.
I love
the Bowieisms
David
on
Bowie.
That. Yes. Yeah.
But if I'm gonna go elsewhere, I'm not gonna go Antichrist. I'm going Portrait. I just think the Portrait of an American Family had like almost like an Appetite for Destruction thing for me, where it was like a game-changing album. Like it was scaring the shit out of your parents. You know what I mean? It was something about that record, like just the way the band was introduced to the world with, you know, the names like Madonna, Wayne Gacy, Marilyn Manson, and we hadn't seen anything like that before. And the imagery and next motherfucker's gonna get my medal, and you know, Cake and Sodomy and Get Your Gun. Oh, and then like I said,
when Slipknot came out and no one knew who the fuck they were, and they're wearing these track suits with these insane masks and you know, just creating complete chaos on stage. It's kind of that same vibe. I really love bands that you look at and say, how the fuck did they break? Like Tool. Tool is an amazing band, but there's nothing blatantly commercial about them. You know,
absolutely, you're
to
right.
think that they sold millions of records, and
even their singles are 8 minutes long. Like how? Think about it. Listen, we could go on all day about this. Jay and I put a couple things here. I'm going to let first one's going to be for Jay, because obviously, you know, he's a huge Megadeth fan. Obviously, you're working on the Marty Friedman book. Jay wants to know your thoughts on the latest Megadeth release.
I think it's the best thing they've done in so long. Hard to say, oh, it's the best thing, you know, since not Rust in Peace. Maybe, or Cryptic Writings I liked. But yeah, it's hard to say, oh, it's the best since, but God damn it, he came to the table, and those songs are super heavy, well-written thrash tunes with a ton of heart. And just to know what he was going through when he did them, you know, to know that he was having chemo and radiation treatments in between sessions, basically, is he'd like get done with his a treatment and go straight to the studio, and his bandmates were, you know, were like, are you sure you want to come in? We can do this another time. And he's like, nah, fuck it. We're, you know, I'm dedicated. I'm going to do this. And he said, for the most part, you know, I guess as far as these things go, his chemo symptoms weren't disastrously heavy. There were a couple days he was throwing up all day, and he was trying to work. And he said he had what he called chemo brain, where he would get confused a lot and bump into things because his equilibrium was off. But he said really there were only a few terrible days, and a lot of it, you know, being with the band and making the music and doing what he loved was where he wanted to be and was therapeutic for him.
I love it.
Yeah, I know Jay loves the record.
I mean, that's where I was with it, and when I first heard the record, and I agree. I guess it's kind of sacrilegious to say like it's on that level, but it's definitely for me the best since. I loved all their albums. I don't think Megadeth really put out a bad album. The only album I didn't like probably in their entire career was Super Collider. That's probably the one.
Not Risk?
I don't. I actually like Risk.
I like Risk. There's a lot that I don't like on it.
I like Moments. I like 3 or 4 songs a lot, but yeah.
I don't think Risk is as bad as it gets credit for. It's almost like
it's their turbo.
I think a lot of times, like I look at Nostradamus the same way with Judas Priest. A lot of people don't like Nostradamus, but I think it's actually a decent record. I think maybe the longer it goes, it might end up having a cult following down the line. But
we could geek out here, but with Nostradamus, I think if that was one album instead of 2, and if they had used orchestration instead of just keyboards, you know, synthesizer, violin sounds, it could have been massive.
Yeah, I guess maybe you're right. It was too long making it a double album. That's probably what takes away from it being a better record.
You guys are making this easy. All these subjects, we could tie them in. So let's talk about double albums.
Double album.
Guns N' Roses released the Use Your Illusion Super Deluxe set. Have you, what do you
don't have
think,
the
John?
whole thing. I'm still trying to get through all the tracks on the Beatles Revolver remix, which is astounding. But it was a great. I mean, great albums. I remember when they came out, and you had to buy one and the other like right away. Did they release them the same day?
Same day, yeah.
Apart? Same day. Okay,
Same day.
I remember buying them both. Yeah. But again, I thought they could have made one fantastic album out of that instead of the two. To me, there's filler. I know diehard Guns fans, love it all and live by every note, every word. But come on, Appetite was all killer, no filler. And when you look at the Use Your Illusions, there's some extraneous stuff, I think.
It's a fair point. See, I'm that Guns fanatic, so I do love all of it. Admittedly, I don't want to live without any of it. But I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge, if you took the best from each one of those records, you have one of the greatest albums of all time.
Right.
But you're right. I mean, let's be honest. Appetite is just a different beast. It's a different animal. It's a different band.
It is a different band.
5
they
guys.
Were in a different place,
Yeah,
they
street
were
urchins.
Yeah, they were exactly. They had no fame. They had no money. They were, street fighters.
Guns N' Roses sums up everything great and bad about rock and roll and everything cliche about it. Like Guns N' Roses sums it all up. I mean, think about it. You have this young, hungry band.
I thought that was Motley Crue.
I think Motley Crue wants to be that, but I think Guns actually is that, right?
Right.
I do think that. But no, I mean, you think about Guns N' Roses, you have 5 guys, broke as a joke, all with heroin addictions, sharing one-room apartment, mooching off of Vicky Hamilton, who was their manager, and basically financed their lives.
Right.
And basically doing something that nobody else was really doing at the time in LA. They had their moments of glam, but it was more Hanwai Rocks, sleazy, Sticky Fingers, Rolling Stones era, mixed with like Johnny Thunders and the Sex Pistols. To me, it wasn't Poison. It was they were just doing something different, and then they blew up, and they shouldn't have. Right? They became the biggest band in the world, but they never toured on that album as a headliner. It was all opening. So then you had this long hiatus. They put Lies out to kill the time. They were all so messed up on junk that they couldn't get them all in the studio together. They finally reconvened in Chicago. 4 years later, they released this double magnum opus, and it was a totally different band. Like the band that was lean, mean, 5 guys, just guitars, amps, bass, nothing else. Now is this giant corporation.
Yeah, almost like this
orchestras and background singers within a 5-year period. It was doomed to implode. Right? It was doomed.
Yeah, I think there's some of that. I think they got too big too fast, and they were already on, this out of control locomotive that had one wheel off the tracks at least,
no pun
at
intended.
all times. But that's what made them so great at first, and because there was that. Are they going to sound like total shit? Is Axl going to even show up? Are they going to, just blow me away and make it feel like I'm in an arena when they're in this tiny Hollywood club? It was the chemistry and and the chemicals, but there was that hunger and that presence. It was just monstrous, I just don't see that in any bands today. And maybe some of it's because it's so hard to reach that level of success. It's like you almost have to go with a playbook that's preconceived by the record elite, the executives, if you want to get play and be taken seriously. And I mean, Ghost, I guess, have broken out to some extent with their own formula. Good for them. I think they're pretty great. And I don't know. I just can't think of that many other metal bands.
I was just going to ask you, who do you think, like, what band could be big enough to carry the torch? Like, I used to think of Ed Sevenfold, but even they've been on a hiatus for like 5 years. I don't think they put even a new single out. Like, right.
And then there was Black Veil Brides and Asking Alexandria, and they kind of seem like the next wave. I don't know. I look at Turnstile, and I think they're pretty killer, but it's more, they have a pop punky kind of vibe
Yeah.
too. And then there's that other band on Roadrunner who I'm blanking on for at the moment. Orange 9, is it? Orange?
No.
Or something. Code Orange. Code Orange is really good and really, really, I think, forward thinking.
What
But
do
there
you
aren't
think
that many.
of, like an arch enemy?
I love Arch Enemy, but it's old school Gothenburg, melodic death metal. Yeah. It's great.
Tell me that doesn't like blow your mind when you realize it's a chick singing it. Like,
and it always was. Now it's Alyssa, and
before. And that's what I mean, though. It's like you hear the vocals, and you're like, "Oh my god, that's a woman singing." And that's why I like the new album. They had some clean vocals on it, and it actually sounds awesome.
Yeah, she sounds really good. But I mean, to me,
that band is single with Nita Strauss on Nita's album.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great track.
Yeah. To me, Michael Amott is that band, though, and he's an astonishing songwriter and guitarist, and he was part of Carcass when they did Heartwork, which is one of my favorite death metal albums, because it's so melodic. And I know they went from Reek of Putrefaction, Symphonies of Sickness, to there's one album in between, but to this much more melodic and less oh my god, I'm going to puke from these lyrics type group. But if you listen back to it, Heartwork has just some amazing playing on it and some great songwriting. And then he brought that to Arch Enemy, who's to this day, I mean, I think they kick. Who's coming out with an album early next year that's also really, really cool from that scene is In Flames.
Oh, okay. I didn't know they had a new record coming out.
Yeah, it's coming out in February. It's been, I mean, I wouldn't say it's been a secret, but I really haven't seen it announced on anything. And then I just happened to be on the Nuclear Blast German website, and they've got this this new album. What's it called? I can't even. Oh, Foregone, I think.
Okay.
Anyway, to me, it's like Clayman. It's like they've gone back to that thrashy melodic death metal sound, where for a long time, to me at least, it seemed like they were trying to do a much more mainstream new metalish kind of thing.
Okay. Well, you guys tied me into the next one. You brought up, we talked about Marilyn Manson. You brought up Motley Crue, John. So let's talk about it. John 5 replacing Mick Mars and Motley Crue. What are your thoughts?
I love John 5 to death. I think he's one of the best guitarists out there.
I agree.
I think he could play anything. I mean, when he was in DLR, he sounded exactly like Eddie Van Halen. He was my favorite guitarist with Marilyn Manson. He's great in Zombie. I just wanted to see Motley Crue hang it up after they wrote in blood with contracts saying that they were going to do that.
And listen, I can forgive a lot of bands because, listen, Ozzy's done it, Kiss has done it.
Right.
But what makes it more disappointing with the Crue is that they called out all those bands and said they'd never do it. And we can maybe live with it, because let's be honest, I was excited for the stadium tour, but to see them come out and to me just be a shadow of what they once were, I found it disappointing. They went out on top back in 2015. Vince never sounded great live, so it's not like he was great. It's when people are dogging on Vince, he was never great live, but he's just not. He's even worse now. So it was really disappointing. But John 5, my biggest thing with John 5 and the Crue is I think he's going to be bored. No disrespect to Mick Mars, but have you watched his Instagram when he's playing like Too Fast for Love? John 5 looks like he's sleeping playing.
Yeah. I mean, he's one of the great metal and guitarists out now. I wouldn't even say metal. He is such a great guitarist.
He's a virtuoso.
When I think of John 5, and I know he's been in a lot, you mentioned all of it, but to me, John 5, like the memory I have when I think of him is playing with Manson when he's the song that I vividly remember. I believe it's on Mechanical Animals. I want to say it's called The Great Big White World. For that, when John 5 is just going like this, and like just his head's like, it looks like his head's going in circles. Like he's just, but he makes it look effortless. You're right. Like he is definitely underrated as far as I think he doesn't get the credit he should as far as being on that pantheon.
We talked about industrial music. Now we're talking about John 5. What about 2 with Rob Halford? Remember that record?
I remember it well.
Yeah. Remember I Am a Pig, the video?
Yeah. It unfortunately it barely made a dent. And
surprising.
I thought it was really cool for Halford to be working with Trent and writing songs in that vein. But a lot of other people didn't. He said that when they toured, like the places would be 3/4 empty.
Yeah, it sounded like 9 Inch Nails. It really did.
Yeah, it was pretty 9 Inch Nailsy. There were a lot of bands around that time. Like remember Gravity Kills and Stabbing Westward?
Of course, yeah.
They were all into that whole thing. But you know who I saw recently who kind of just reaffirmed that, you can do this, like the Stones. Iron Maiden are the Stones of metal. Maiden still has the same lineup, their power lineup anyway. Bruce came and went, but he's still with them. He still sings like a beast.
Yeah.
And the guitarists, they look like they're having so much fun up there.
It's true.
You could tell they put on like a Madonna style stage show. No diss. I don't mean that as a diss whatsoever. It's
I totally know what you mean.
Extravaganza. Yeah. They had a giant plane coming down from the rafters.
Yeah.
In addition to Eddie sword fights and all kinds of shenanigans, it was great. It's great fun.
I went a few years back. I think Aaron, didn't you go with me?
Yeah, we were there. That was when I first saw Ghost live.
They have,
which I'll get into.
You're right, John. To be as old as they are, and the energy level that Bruce Dickinson has is second to none. Like, I don't think there's anybody that compare to his energy on the stage, because he runs around still like he's like 20 years old, and he's what? They got to be in their 70s, right?
And they're not dialing it in. Their albums are still really solid.
I agree with you.
Speaking of Bruce, did you see him going after the fans smoking weed in the front?
No,
you'll find it on Facebook or on.
Oh, that's hysterical.
Viral. He was pissed off that they were smoking weed.
That's really funny.
I just thought it was funny.
Legal in Jersey now, so
a rock concert.
I don't know where I saw him in Jersey, so he's supposed to be. You'd think he'd be open to that, but
he was pissed, and you know how Bruce can get when he's pissed. Yeah. You would have thought it was Sharon Osbourne.
I was going to say throwing eggs, right?
Yeah, eggs at him.
So let's go back to the age-old argument of Priest versus Maiden, which also you can tie in if you want to talk about what the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has become.
We already had the banner there.
Oh, okay.
You're psychic.
It's like I'm reading your mind.
Yeah.
It's I think Priest's lineup now is incredible. I think the last album was great, but is it Priest when even Glenn Tipton isn't on stage except for 3 songs? I mean, Richie's great. He's an amazing guitarist. Faulkner, I think, is carrying the band right now from a musical, guitar extravaganza kind of level. But look at it's just, I guess, just age and time, and you can't blame KK. He of course left, and there's
time
this
doesn't
huge
slow down.
rift. But you can't blame Glenn for getting sick and not being able to. And he could still write, and he is writing for the band. So I was super stoked that they were still great when I saw them last, about 3 months ago or 4 months, maybe 6 months, I don't know. But they put on a really great show too. So I brought it up, but I wouldn't say, Maiden's the real thing and Priest isn't. I still think Priest rock like the devil, but yeah, it is strange when these lineups you've grown up with are constantly shifting.
Well, I think Richie Faulkner was a blessing for Priest, because when KK left, he seems like a clone of the young KK.
Yeah,
doesn't he?
Yeah, but I think he's better.
The young KK,
I think he's a better guitarist, because
I
don't know, maybe KK can do things that I'm unaware of, but I've seen Richie play like straight up jazz and blues and go out of the box and just.
I can't disagree with you there, appearance wise. He's definitely the clone, but I think he's a better guitar player. What were you saying, Jay? I'm sorry.
No, what happened so KK dropped an album, KK Downing's Priest.
Right.
It's not on anywhere for streaming now. It's like off the air. Like I don't know if you heard anything.
I heard it. I interviewed him for it. he was all super sour grapes about, Priest. It's called KK's Priest.
No,
Yeah.
I'm saying I've heard it, and I had the
Yeah.
album on Amazon, but now when you go to, I go back to stream it, it's gone.
It's not on like Spotify.
It's not.
Yeah,
You
it's
can
taken.
only go on.
No.
You can only see it on YouTube now, and I'm like, did something happen?
Maybe the name Priest caused legal
Yeah,
That's what I
ramblings.
was
I don't know
curious
about.
if you had heard something.
But he was on stage with them at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I mean,
Yeah.
they weren't hugging each other, but
Well, I will say this: Rob Halford said it was very, very special to be up there with KK, which I thought was a nice thing.
that's a nice
You know?
gesture, yeah, because there was
Yeah.
a lot of ugliness between Glenn and KK. That's where things got bad because I guess Glenn hadn't disclosed or maybe didn't even know he was suffering from Parkinson's disease because he's had it for 15 years. And KK's accusing him of drinking and being unable to play fast or play accurately and taking pot shots at him. And when I interviewed him, I was kind of dumbfounded by, I mean, there's two sides to every story, but he was very, very bitter about the whole Priest experience and how they treated him when they reunited and Glenn was out of the band. He thought he was a sure thing to be in. And
I read that as well.
Yeah. And he was very upset about that.
Yeah.
And
I read Rob's book.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. What's that, John? What were you saying?
Talk about Rob's book. It's amazing.
I read Rob's book, and he really goes into great detail throughout the book of how it was always tit for tat,
right,
with KK and Glenn. They never got along,
right? But
like it was like brothers.
So good. Just on a confession. I mean, it's called confessional, so a confession. So
confessions, yes,
a confessional level. It's great, but just to see how forthright and honest he was about suffering in the band, being an in the closet gay man and having to act like he's in the 80s, this studly, portrait of rock and roll. I think he illustrated that beautifully
in the book. Unbelievably.
For my podcast, I interviewed him and he talked about it in detail. And I was like, wow, that was really sad.
It's unbelievable in the book. I don't want to go into too much detail.
Doesn't he have a brand new book called Biblical coming out, or it's out, or it's coming out?
Yeah, I think it's out. It's kind of like the biblical sins of metal. It's a list of it's kind of like a handbook. It's more of a coffee table book really than a real
Confessions is a real read.
Yeah, because he did the that was totally an autobiography, and it was unrelenting and honest. And
and speaking of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Dave Holland was included.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you've heard, you remember the accusations.
Yeah. They never talked about it.
Yeah, I'm reading some stuff now where there's somebody that knew him, a lady, that says that I'm misquoting this, but basically she said that the accuser, remember they said it was a special needs kid that supposedly he assaulted, that he really wasn't. He was just a slow learner, and he was in on a scam with an older boy.
Really?
And this is all coming out now posthumously about Dave Holland to clear his name. So I just
it's
throwing it out there. It was nice he was inducted.
Yeah, it is. And that's the danger of these he said, she said scenarios. And I'm all for the Me Too movement, and I think that there's been an awful lot of abuse, and women have been put in positions where they've been compromised and felt extremely uncomfortable, and that's all super wrong. But sometimes when this happens 30 years ago and now you have an accusation, it's hard, and I probably don't want to say too much because I don't really have a stance on it. I just feel like if it can ruin someone's career and their career deserve to be ruined, then that's just desserts. But if someone got fucked over because of sour grapes for some reason or something, then it's just horrible.
Absolutely. Well, we got a little heavy there. Let's lighten it up. We have a viewer here with a question for John. Serge Tankian is one of my favorite artists. My question is System of a Down carried by him, or is Darren the Paul McCartney of the classics they produce?
That's a good question. I mean, I think they're both powerhouses of that band. Darren writes great songs. He's this real iconoclast, and they almost have a McCartney-Lennon relationship in that they're friends, but I don't think they like each other on a certain level, or can be around each other too long.
Yeah.
Serge is very artistic and poetic and political, and Darren wants to sit around and smoke pot and play music and listen to death metal or black metal or whatever he's into. I know he was into black metal. I don't know if it's still his thing, but they're both really talented artists in their own right, and that's one of the things that made SOAD so special.
Awesome. We appreciate the question. Listen, John, obviously we have you on here because you're Mr. Metal, but it is sports and metal.
Yeah, you can tell from the long hair and the glasses.
Listen, we'll get a little sports in before we end the show. I know you're pumped about your Giants, man.
Giants, man. Is it a fluke? Is it? I don't know. They keep winning. I can't. Yeah. They don't
Jay's
have a
an
wide
Eagles
receiver.
fan. Jay's an Eagles fan, so you guys are going to be at it.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be tough. They don't have a wide receiver. They still don't. They've got two great runners. They're Jones is able to scramble around, and I wouldn't say he's the best quarterback at running, but he's pulled it off in a lot of situations, because you could see, unlike Eli Manning would throw 3 out of 4 downs, and then 1 out of 4 would be a pickoff. But it's all Saquon, and it's a running game now that the Giants are forced to play, and I think that's different for them, because I think for years they were an air team, and God, they need a wide receiver.
Yeah, it's amazing. They really don't have a wide receiver. I will say this. I do think the Eagles are going to win the division.
Yeah.
They obviously are the favorite, but Jay's in a fantasy football league with me, and Jay will attest. I'm not a Giants fan. I'm a Miami Dolphins fan. But Jay will attest this to be true. I did have a text after week 1 when Saquon Barkley had a huge game to break the Giants had their shock opening day. And I remember I sent a text in the group text. I said, hot take. If Saquon is back, the Giants have a chance to win the NFC East. And
what
so
the Giants
far,
are doing, they're able to
stop.
They're able to stop teams in that, between the 30-yard line and the goal line a lot, and they've had to settle for extra for field goals or missed field goals. I think that's been the key to their success, because they've had a lot of close games. And it's because you look at a game and there's always 1 or 2 breakout plays where, oh yeah, there was that 50-yard pass that brought them to that touchdown, and you can't really count on the Giants for that big play unless it's a Saquon kind of thing. They're much more of a kind of gritty, 10 yards at a time kind of team this year.
Very true.
And I hope they can hold it together. But I was stoked to be at the Meadowlands when they played the Ravens and won. It's the one and only live professional football game I've been to. But I took my son.
Awesome.
We had a blast.
That's great.
That's awesome, John.
I know you're a Yankee fan too. So are the Yankees going to sign Judge?
They did as best they could.
Well, are they going to sign Judge? Do you think they're going to hold on to him?
Is Judge gonna? I think Judge will go where the money is.
I think so too, but I think the Yankees will pony up.
I think they'll pony. He's he just won the MVP. He's if he can have anywhere near a year next year as he had this year, but I think he was really disappointed. Then again, he didn't really show up for the playoffs either.
No, he didn't.
A lot of their star guys just kind of got cold.
I'm a Mets fan. I can relate. I can relate.
It was an exciting year, though. It was. And it's always, if they make the playoffs, I'm always content. And the Astros, oh well, we always lose the Astros.
They do own you guys.
Yeah, they tend to.
Anyway, John, we're actually out of time. Fuck sports. Let's talk metal. Well, there's always next week. We're out of time this week. John, listen, we are always so glad to have you on the show, and we would love to have you back soon.
Love to do it. It's always a blast.
Would. You know? Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. I want to just give a shout out again before we head out of here. Visit our sponsor, La Terrain Watches. Go to their website, www.laterrain.com. Use our promo code S&M. That's the letters S&M as in Sports and Metal to save 10% off your purchase. Tell them Sports and Metal sent you. Make sure you check us out on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at Sports and Metal. Visit our website, www.sportsandmetal.com. And make sure to check out Jon Wiederhorn. Check out his podcast, Backstaged, The Devil in Metal. It is unbelievable. You can find it anywhere you check out podcasts. All right, guys. Always a pleasure. Until next time, rock on.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
And that's our show. Tune in next time for more Sports and Metal with Jason Voorhees and Aaron Savage. Ooh, yeah. Got something to say? Hit us up at sportsandmetal0423 at yahoo.com or on Twitter at